Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the craziest chess tournament of 2025. Clutch Chess. A 4-player round robin, which is 3 days long, and where on every single day, the points for a win increase. This is day 2. After day 1, to the surprise of some, but not everybody, Gukesh, the reigning world champion, was winning the tournament, but it was very, very close. Magnus was half a point behind, and then you had Hikaru and Fabi as well. After day 2, things are heating up, and tomorrow on day 3, or maybe it's already over, maybe you're watching in the future, we will have a winner, and every win tomorrow will count for 3 points. So without further ado, I'm going to just get right into the games because they are all exciting. Today we had Magnus Carlsen arriving late against Hikaru. You can skip ahead to the lore of that game if you would like. Obviously, it's always a story when Magnus arrives late. It's always quite fun, and people get up in arms, and some people think it's hilarious, and some people think it's disrespectful, and he probably was just slightly late, to be honest. He's not playing any mind games whatsoever. We're going to kick things off, obviously, with the matchup between Magnus and Gukesh. Yesterday, Magnus beat Gukesh, but it was kind of crazy because he wasn't winning in the final position. So today, Magnus opens up with knight to f3. The ready, Gukesh plays d5 and c6 and bishop g4. This is one of the best variations, putting pressure on the knight, looking to build the pyramid here. Magnus plays c4, e6, and he decides, rather than playing queen b3 or castling one of these moves, or h3, which is also very popular, he takes, and now what Gukesh does, very normal and familiar line, I have seen this line myself with the black pieces, you actually take the knight right away, and then you take like this. And this is a rock-solid setup, because both sides have no c-pawn, which means white can no longer put pressure on this pawn, except if you play e4, which he's not going to do. We have castles, we have knight to c6, d4, knight c3, and just a very, very solid position. And black basically plays like this and says, good luck. You're absolutely never going to break my position down. Now, this bishop is obviously quite passive, so I'm very curious to see, and by very curious to see, I mean I actually have seen the game, right? But, but, you know, like, let's say for the dramatic part of the recap, let's just pretend I haven't. But I'm very curious to see and explain to you how Magnus will win this game. So we have rook c8. Queen e2, very mysterious little moves. Okay, Gukesh plays knight e8, trying to put the knight on d6, maybe. Rook c1, okay, rook fc1. This rook stays here because you want to maybe advance on that side. Wow, bishop e1. And for the record, Magnus has not thought at all. Queen d7. What are the ideas here? f5, bishop e2. I mean, Gukesh is doing what looks to be a pretty logical sequence of moves. What is Magnus doing? Knight a4. Look at the setup that Magnus gets. The understanding that the rook should be here, these bishops should be like this, and then you have the kind of path forward on the queen side. f3 kicks the knight out. The knight goes to c5. And now it goes to d3. What is happening? It actually looked like up to this point everything was great. The computer now wants to continue to improve the position and maybe try to push the b pawn a little bit later. That seems to be the plan. Kind of insane how quickly Magnus set this up. And now Gukesh can play g5. He also is trying to play the position a little bit more slowly. And now that Magnus's b pawn gets going, he trades off the rooks. He advances the 2 pawns. And by the time Gukesh is playing this, Magnus has already made some good progress on this side of the board, but clearly Gukesh understood that he couldn't just sit around doing nothing. Unfortunately, this, though, is a little bit too much. Here, he had to maybe play h5 and continue with a kingside attack, but by opening too much of the position, Magnus, like a samurai, quickly chops down the position, and it's actually just very hard to defend yourself. You can play f4, but that's actually going to play directly into my hands. I play king g2, very simple move. Queen e2. I have bishop b4 whenever I want it. I'll infiltrate on the last rank. And you're not going to be able to defend your king. You're not going to be able to defend your pawns. Bishop f5 was not the best move. Magnus could have played queen c6, looking to trade and then advance this pawn. But this endgame is a huge problem. It's a huge problem because you are frozen with black. Your knight cannot move, and I am very close to simply ending the game, and Gukesh resigned. Gukesh in this game was given the full Magnus treatment. All right, really. This was a positional grind from Magnus, and the second that black made an inaccuracy, the game was over on the spot, basically. Just on the spot. You know, Gukesh had to kind of sustain this unpleasant position, this unpleasant feeling. He had to understand that there was nothing to panic about. But this move, a very bold move, Magnus locked in for 1 minute, chopped everything down, and was just immediately playing for a win. So now Gukesh in the next game has to strike back. For the record, Magnus gets 2 points for that win, right? A draw is 1 point. And I think on the last day, a draw is 1.5. That's the way they are doing it. So Gukesh now has to play for a win with white. Magnus, meanwhile, playing very chill, e4, e5, and against the Italian, he goes d6, and against castle, he trades off the bishop. Now, if you look at the opening database, the move d6 is like a 1% played type of move, and bishop e6, there are officially like no games in the database. So we go from a position that has been reached hundreds of thousands of times to one that has almost never been played, ever. Black commits the doubling of the pawns, and is just going to develop with knight f6, bishop e7, and castle. And now white has this position to work with, where black has a weakness, and white can maybe go for d5. Instead, Gukesh damages Magnus's pawns and basically says, look, this is going to be a problem for you for the rest of the game. Magnus says, yeah, look, we're going to trade the queens, and I'm going to take the pawn. And I don't really understand what the idea was here. After knight d2, bishop c5, like Gukesh could have went queen e2. Probably he didn't like that the rook and the bishop are both going to see this with the move knight h5 incoming. It's actually okay. You have queen e2, knight h5, knight f3. Instead, he does this. Magnus quickly chops everything down. And I mean, you're simply not going to win this position against Magnus. You might not lose the position, but you're definitely not going to win it. Magnus playing defense. Pretty boring game. Doubled e-pawns, you know, I mean, nothing really to write home about. And suddenly, you know, Gukesh, who probably should have been playing this position just purely for a draw, rushes here with the move h4. He doesn't have a lot of time. I guess rushes is the wrong word, but he you know, he rushes the pawn play, and he needed to play a4. That is what he had to do. It's a bit of a mysterious position. He plays the move h4, and after b5, he is losing. He's simply losing. His pawns run out of mobility. Even though he's able to go here, white is out of moves. What do I mean by that? Well, g3, e5, which is, for some reason, I don't know why that's given a question mark. I don't, that's the best move. Game review is, I don't know. So that was a weird one. That second game was really funny because Magnus just kind of played like a major sideline and obviously had a slightly worse position from the opening, but he got Gukesh thinking, as you can see here from the 2.5 minute time disadvantage. Yeah, I mean, just was never really in doubt. So a 2-0 for Magnus, getting 4 points in the standings, and Gukesh getting 0 in the first 2 games. And, you know, again, like, yesterday, Gukesh ended the day in first place, and I saw a bunch of stuff on social media of people being like, look, Gukesh beat Hikaru, he didn't throw his king, I mean, he's much more deserving of all his accolades, and he's a better person than Hikaru, and blah, 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 and I was like, this is just rage bait, really. I think that's literally all it is. I don't think these people actually believe what they're saying. The two are completely not comparable. Also, I thought all the context was already provided for the situation, but yeah, I don't know. So now I don't know what the narrative is going to be today, but yeah, I was seeing all sorts of stuff yesterday. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on Gukesh. Like, there really is, because when he succeeds, he's like, and then when he doesn't, it's, I feel for the guy. I try to give everybody good PR for those that deserve it. Now, meanwhile, while these two guys were figuring things out, we had Fabi and Hikaru, who yesterday put on a great show. Today, they continue right where they left off. Hikaru playing this English line, Fabi playing into it. Actually, Hikaru has played this in Title Tuesday a lot. This game was balanced for quite some time. And... Wait. Wait a minute. Nobody move. Hold on. No. This game happened first. This game happened first. That was the second game. That's why I wanted to point that out. Okay. Hikaru playing some, Sicilian sideline with bishop to c4. You generally cannot play an Italian against the Sicilian. I know, theoretically, it sounds like you can do that, but geographically speaking, but yeah, an Italian against a Sicilian is really strange stuff, but Hikaru makes it work. In rapid chess, you can basically play any opening against any opening. From the opening, I would say that white had a much more pleasant position. Black's pawns were sort of strange. The bishops were not developed. The king was a little bit weak. But Hikaru chose the wrong plan forward. He should have played knight c3, apparently. Instead of this, now he cannot put his knight on c3. He still played something that was very natural, which is getting the knight to c4 or to e4. But Fabi had an opportunity to strike with g5. He didn't take it. And now Hikaru is going to continue to put pressure. Somehow recapturing the pawn that's just hanging is a bad move. Computer wants knight b3. Not findable as far as I'm concerned. But after e5, white needed to go all in. He needed to play queen h5. And did he do it? No. Hikaru giving up the knight. His idea was that after knight takes a5, there is bishop takes d5 and rook e7. That was his idea. And that's what he went for. And then here, again, white can continue with some aggressive play. Otherwise, you can play maybe queen d2. Hikaru went a5, and that was almost his last moment because he never generated any sort of initiative on the king side. Fabiano took the c pawn and just got himself a passed pawn, and Hikaru did what looks to be the most natural moves, which is defend himself, but it got totally out of control. The white king is directly in the line of fire. There is no back rank checkmate because of queen g8, and black is just completely winning, actually, like out of nowhere. Kind of crazy because from the opening, actually, it went really well for Hikaru, but he chose the wrong plan. It was a little bit too dynamic of a position. He had some ideas like queen h5, but he never played aggressively, and Fabi won the very first game. So then Hikaru with the black pieces this time, right? Now he has the black pieces, going for an English, like going for the line that he has played online. And again, like white here just has to chill. Like Fabi just has to basically play this position and he's better. And I mean, there's no way that, Hikaru is going to make a comeback here. I have no idea how black is ever going to win this position. But Fabi was down 3 minutes. And sometimes like when you're in a must not lose situation, sometimes you hesitate. And you don't really know how to play. Like, do you play for a draw? Do you play ambitiously? He seemed in this game like he was playing relatively ambitiously with h4 and so on. But, b5, like the position is trying to simplify. And, now you're just trading down the pieces and pawn takes. And, I mean, maybe Hikaru's going to trick him into time trouble. But, like, you look at this and you go, well, the only one that's playing for anything is white. I mean, black has a worse pawn structure. A slightly safer king, but like rook b1, how do you rook b1, rook, right? Except in this case, it actually makes sense. Queen c2, rook b1, easy game for Fabi. Oh, I mean, look at this position. This is a worst nightmare for black. He can't really do anything. Fabi repositioning nicely. Hikaru trying some tricks. Fabi down to 15 seconds. That could get him in a little bit of trouble. But the position is totally balanced. Queen and knight. I mean, now you're going to just go, yeah, knight endgame. I mean, this is nothing here. King e7, knight d7. Whoa, apparently whoops. Uh-oh. And my guy Hikaru on the 60th move pulls a rabbit out of a hat. Trades into a winning king and pawn endgame because suddenly his liability is an asset. It is an outside pass pawn in a king and pawn endgame. And the game is over because white will just run in and eat literally every pawn. And Fabiano Caruana, also completely out of nowhere, loses this game. And these boys split another one, 1-1. They each get 2 points for the leaderboard. Now, Fabi didn't sit on this. And, didn't just sit there and be sad and whatever. He, in the next round, has to play Magnus Carlsen, right? That's how it works. In this tournament, you don't really have any breaks ever. Wow, now he has the white pieces against Magnus. So, e4, e5. Magnus goes for the Berlin, knight to f6. Castles, d4. And in this position yesterday, Hikaru took the pawn, gave up his bishop, trapped the knight comes forward. It's a very famous Berlin draw line. So quite fascinating that Magnus is not looking for the kill with the black pieces. Magnus is actually completely fine with making draws. Fabi's not. He takes. And we go to what's known as the Berlin endgame. And there are many, many setups here for white. There are h3 setups, knight c3 setups. The bishop can go to f4. You can decide where, where this rook is going. And, well, those three moves actually happen. Black goes here, and then black goes here. And you can always trade the rook if you need it. There are random positions. Black can go for g5. There are some positions black can make specific trades of the knight, like on h4. Like, I mean, there is... It's an endgame that is extremely mysterious, extremely difficult to understand. Knight g5 is the move chosen by Fabiano. Magnus defends himself. Rook e1 and h4. And now we take on e6, rook e6 and knight e4. And this position is just very pleasant for white. Very, very pleasant. Magnus going c5. And as we see from the time, 3 minutes up, it's clearly Fabiano who's a little bit more comfortable in this Berlin endgame, right? So c3, c4. And what you're going to do here with white, and generally what you do in these Berlin endgames, especially with the space advantage, is you're going to push these pawns. This side of the board in the endgame is going to be instrumental. Trust me, these guys have studied computer analysis. These guys have probably played dozens, if not hundreds, of training games in the Berlin endgame. These guys know all of the little plans, not just memorized openings. Now we have g4, and another thing that you see here is the imbalance of the pawns. White is the only one with an h-pawn, which means if these two pawns get forward and you get to play the move h6, you're going to have a pass pawn, and that's going to be a problem. And for the next, 15 moves, Fabi plays a masterclass. He pushes Magnus all the way back. He uses his king. The king becomes a weapon. And even though Magnus is grabbing a pawn, this attack is too powerful. King g4, forcing g6. And now you have an infiltration on the h-file. You force Magnus to defend his knight with a pawn, but you are getting in on the h-file against the king. This king, which moved on move 10, never got comfortable. Never got comfortable. And this is a really bad sign. Rook h2, rook h1. Magnus Carlsen on the ropes. Fabiano Caruana chucks the entire queenside. You are 2 moves away from making a queen, but rook h7, rook f7 is a literal checkmate. Bishop takes f4, rook h7. Look at Magnus Carlsen taking on a2, taking on c3, taking on f4, and Fabi ignoring everything. Knight back to g7. He wins the rook. The pawn is stopped. And now a very simple conclusion to this game. And that's it. That is the end of the game. c3, knight e2. GG. You win this pawn, and the game is over. c2, you take, and promotion is covered. Fabiano Caruana just won his best game against Magnus Carlsen that I have seen in quite some time. That was a complete positional masterclass. Now, I don't know if Magnus is sleep deprived or not feeling particularly good. Yesterday, he said after eating breakfast, he started feeling sick. I don't know if that's a respiratory thing. Generally, if you eat breakfast and then start feeling sick, could be stomach, which is brutal. I mean, playing chess with a stomach infection, I can't even imagine. I mean, most of us play chess on the toilet, but that's voluntary, not involuntary, But just an absolute masterclass of a game. I mean, Fabiano, take a bow. And so Magnus now needs to strike back in the next game, and he has the white pieces, And so he's going to go for, he's going to hunt him down. So he goes for a Queen's Gambit accepted sideline, Queen a4 check, not the best variation. Fabi plays a very solid setup. Magnus deliberately playing very provocative chess here, very provocative. And Fabiano sacrificing a rook to put Magnus's king in the middle of the board. Magnus deliberately plays an extremely risky position because, you need to take some risks to win the game. Fabi, amazing move here. You look at this position, you're thinking, castle, right? Of course. But that gives white time, and Fabi plays the best move, e5, striking back in the center of the board, seemingly just losing a pawn, but the idea is that when you take, I sack my knight! 95! Ripping open the position. Queen to d3 is checkmate on the board. And if you take with the knight, I give you a check, and I win your queen. Don't forget that when the bishop moves, if it's a check, you will lose your queen. So Magnus has to go here. Fabi plants the horse on d3 and is simply completely winning. The queen goes to a8, and a few moves later, the evaluation plummets off a cliff. Rook a2, rook b1, it is just lost. I mean, the position is just hopeless, but anything can happen in these games. Fabi, g5, the best move, because when you take it, I take on e4, and then I take on f2. Fabiano Caruana is eating Magnus Carlsen's pieces like he is at a Norwegian buffet. The rook has to move. You give another check. He's using this king as a freaking boxing heavy bag. Rook h1. Now the best move here would have been rook back to a6 and a brutal, embarrassing checkmate on the outskirts of the board, but Fabi only trying to move forward. And actually what's crazy is that in a few moves you're going to see signs of life, as Fabi also got into a time trouble, completely insane game. And not only are you going to see signs of life, in a few moves you are going to see that Magnus Carlsen roars back into this game with equality. The position is not just mate in 4, it's 0.6. What? Now, he takes the wrong way. Apparently here he needed to play knight c3, attacking the rook, because it can't protect us anymore. He gets another opportunity on the knight move. Rook e4 or king e4 are both okay. And then here, you have to bring the rook back to e1. He goes here. That's a losing move because knight d1 check. And now rook c2, beautiful move, sealing the position. b2, b1 is incoming. And Fabiano Caruana would not give another chance. Oh my gosh. What a game. What a game. Oh, from the opening, yeah, this is probably the craziest game Magnus was a part in. And there was mate on the board. There was mate in 4. If Fabi found rook a6, rook h6, that would have been crazy. I feel like Magnus even saw it, by the way. But he got like a, you know, a fresh breath of life, like when he survived that. By the way, while these guys were doing this, Gukesh and Hikaru made 2 draws. So there will not be any social media posts today. There will not be any throwing of any kings. Hey, do you realize that Fabi just beat Magnus 2-0, which means Fabi gets 4 points for this matchup and Magnus gets 0, which means that going into the last round of the day, Fabiano has 7.5 from 3.5. Magnus has 7.5 from 7.5. Hikaru has 7 and Gukesh has 6. 7.5, 7.5, 7, and 6. Going into the last round of the day, Hikaru with the white pieces versus Magnus, and Magnus isn't there. He's not there. He's a minute late to the game. He sits down, they shake hands, he does the adjusting of the pieces. I will upload a short about it if I haven't already. You know me. We got it from that Magnus content. And then he got up again. So they sat down, he played, there we go, Magnus a minute on the first move. And then he went here, and then he got up and he got a bottle of water. So he is going for another Pierce defense. Knight e2, c6. Now here, in my e4 course on Chessly, I recommend the setup h3 followed by g4. This is, in my opinion, the best setup for like 99% of the rating ladder. Of course, if my opponent is Magnus, I will lose no matter what I play. And if I'm even carrying a baseball bat during the game to hit him with. But, like this setup is really annoying because you get kingside attacking possibilities. You have a very nice knight behind the pawns and easy development and space and everything. Yeah, we're not going to get any of that. Hikaru playing super solid, bishop g2, castle. And he plays this a bit later, but now Magnus plays this move h5. So you see Magnus really doesn't want g4. And he knows what he's talking about. This is an annoying setup. Hikaru plays maximalist, right? f4, bishop e3. Very tense position. And not just Magnus arriving a little bit late to this game and being down a minute, Magnus was actually down 4 minutes. 40% of the starting allotted time he was down. Crazy. So now, White's got to decide, does he keep making improving moves? Does he at some point jump into the position and do something? He does that, and it's wrong. And that's just the, you play Magnus effect. Apparently, this is completely the wrong idea. Hikaru playing very logically, but Magnus is building up a counterattack of his own, and he plays the counterattack, and now Black is just better. So now Hikaru has to just, again, do you decide, what do you do? Do you try to trade all the pieces? He plays e5. Magnus grabs the a4 pawn. Somehow he's just a pawn up. And not only is he a pawn up, pretty soon he's going to, probably catch up on the clock. Although 3 minutes down, 1 minute and 38 remaining, and Hikaru is on his way to making a nice comeback in this game. Can Magnus play 47 seconds? He has 47 seconds to 4 minutes and 25. This is not easy. Not easy at all to convert this position. So Hikaru's probably going to get another chance. Rook c1, knight d6. White is a pawn down, but these bishops are a problem. Rook e2, what a move. Bishop b6, Magnus, 29 seconds. Knight back to f1, and here comes c5, the threat of a queen trade, the threat of a knight for bishop trade, and this pawn is moving down the board. Hikaru trades the queens, but here comes the pawn. Magnus only has 15 seconds remaining. Every time you make a move, you gain 5 seconds on the clock. His knights roar forward. The knight somehow jumping into d3, just like in the Fabiano game. And this guy, the h-pawn, the pawn that was holding back the white position, suddenly pulling it apart at the seams. Magnus knight f4, and before you know it, the time is even. A 4-minute comeback. And a total domination. Knight to e4, knight to g5, and listen, Hikaru was full of confidence after their game yesterday. He was. He managed to beat Magnus in a very, very convincing way, and today, the way Magnus roared back from the position of bishop to d1, like 4 minutes to 8, and then a little bit later, 40 seconds on the clock for Magnus to 4 minutes for Hikaru is just mind-blowing. To win this position, playing every move within 5 seconds is, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's basically the lean forward meme. Now, for the record, we have one more game. And like I said, Hikaru was full of confidence, right? So Magnus gets 2 points for that game. Keep in mind, before that round, it was 7.5, 7.5, 7, and 6 for Gukesh. So Hikaru looking for a win with black, going for a Sicilian defense, not taking any easy way out. Accelerated dragon, bishop e3, knight c6, Magnus going for a very positional line with bishop to d4, just basically trying to, make Hikaru a little bit uncomfortable. And he did get an opening advantage, but very quickly after both sides castled, the advantage for white was gone. He went queen c5. He was looking to do something here with the queen and the bishop, getting the queen out of the way. In came f5, and just like in the last game, Magnus bullied Hikaru with the bishops. Hikaru's bullying Magnus with the bishops, and it's about to get real bad. Bishop to b6, queen b7. Hikaru gives away a rook. He has to sacrifice the rook to open up his bishop. Magnus playing defense. Hikaru, rook d5, hitting around the queen. Bishop b2, nice combination. Rook b5, oh my goodness, what a move. Rook b5 is crazy. He could have went bishop a3, rook b7, and rook a5, which I don't even understand. But the idea was to bring the bishop to c5 and attack white's weak king, which doesn't have a way to defend itself. Instead, we have this, and Hikaru's got to win this game. He ends up winning back the rook, but in the ensuing endgame, he is just worse. And he is playing the most annoying endgame player who has ever lived, who has an outside pass pawn, a pawn with nobody stopping it. And folks, you best believe that that pawn is going to come in handy as Magnus starts to push it, forcing a reaction from Hikaru. White is now walking the king into the middle with d4. Hikaru has to get rid of the pawn. He's going to keep this pawn as long as possible as Magnus, and he wins this game the way he has won many, many games in his career. An endgame masterclass. The second it hit the endgame, just like the second a wrestler or a grappler hits the mat, it's over. They grab a heel, they grab the neck, anything. It's over. 2-0. Very emphatic victory for Magnus, who won or lost every game he played. He 2-0'd Gukesh, he 2-0'd Hikaru, and he lost 0-2 to Fabi. So, yeah, I don't think I don't know the last time he's lost a match 100% like that, but crazy turn of events. Meanwhile, the only decisive game in the matchup between Gukesh and Fabi. Gukesh beat Fabi yesterday 2-0. Today, the games are worth a little bit more. The other game was a draw. And in this game, we had a King's Indian defense, which has been played a lot in this tournament. Since I came home, I've been having allergies again. Like, I don't know if it's my dog bringing stuff into the house and he's covered, but my nose has been so itchy, and you can tell because it's really red. So I'm gonna go take probably allergy med after this. Bishop 2e3, bishop g5, and Gukesh just immediately going after Fabi, not letting him feel any sort of comfort. But Fabi's like, all right, bring it on, young man. Knight back to f3. We take on h4. We welcome the rook. Gukesh, meanwhile, 10:05 to start the game. 10:44 on the 12th move. He is not hacking the clock. You gain 5 seconds every time you make a move. Gukesh just played all preparation. All preparation. He knows so many openings now as part of his training camps, but then he spends 3 minutes on the move knight takes h4, and I feel like that gave Fabi like a, some momentum. Queen g5, knight f3, and now queen back to g6. The computer, every move is screaming for black to take this knight, removing a key defender of the king, but damaging the structure, destabilizing the center, and not allowing the knight to go to the d5 square. We're about to see. It's still possible, by the way, and he does it because now he can win the pawn on e4. Gukesh going king f1, looking for rook e1 ideas. Queen g6, you're going to bring the bishop, like to, obviously counterattack. White is better, though, because he has the 2 bishops, and black's king is way weaker. h5, and Gukesh builds up a very big advantage. Knight d4, rook h3, f3 ideas, like rook g3. I mean, there's a way to attack here, but he doesn't pull it off. He plays it slightly incorrectly. Fabi jumps back with the knight. Now everything is hanging. The pawn can take the knight could take the knight could take the bishop, the knight could take the other knight. This queen could take this bishop, defended with the rook. So we have knight takes g6. We have queen takes bishop from Fabi. These guys are always playing such uncompromising chess. We swap the queens, we take, and this is the position we have to work with. It is equal, but it's very unpleasant because one guy has his rook planted on the second rank of the opponent, which is what you want in a rook endgame, and it's opposite colored bishop, so the person that starts an attack first is going to be really successful. And Fabi is just going for the king, and you can't even stop it, really. You have to play super passively. Bishop b7, rook h2, the king blocks, and this rook is coming. This rook is going to arrive very, very soon. This is a terrible tale of the rooks here. Rook f8, bishop g5, and the game ends because the attack is good enough to win the endgame. This pawn now, just like in the Magnus game, the outside pass pawn, a nightmare. A complete nightmare for white to deal with. Frankly, impossible to deal with. You try to do something, but the pawn just runs away. And Fabi ends the game by sacrificing his rook with the idea that this pawn literally can't be stopped by the bishop. The bishop cannot get back in time because it can't win all the pawns, and then it can't even go to its own diagonal because of the pawn on c3. So Fabi winning the last game of the day, and we go into the final day with Magnus Carlsen 11.5 after the 4-0 victory over Hikaru. Fabi with 10.5 after the 3-1 victory, right, over Gukesh, and Hikaru and Gukesh tied with 7. But here's the thing. If those guys win the first game tomorrow, they have both got 10 points. So theoretically, it is really close. It's really, really close going into the final day. And before this round, it was really close, but Magnus beat Hikaru 4-0. And before that, he lost 4-0. So very interesting tournament, very exciting. Tomorrow, they each have to play 6 more games, and anything can happen. That's all I have for you today. And yeah, hope you enjoy. Get out of here.